to find what they do need. And if you can clean out all the stuff that you don't need, number one. Number two, organize what you have in a way that's consistent across TriMet, so everybody knows where everything is. It makes it very easy to find it, even without the application of technology, just on existing shared drives and things like that. You can make, we're going to give you the structure to make improvements to what you're doing today.
Excellent, thank you.
You bet.
This is really more of a comment. I strongly support this effort. In my past lives, when I worked at the City of Portland for the city auditor, one of the functions that reported to me was the records management function. And that was back in the dark ages, back in the 90s, so before all the electronic stuff. But I learned a lot from those people. They were very good. They had a good program. And then when I went to the City of Tigard, the records management program also reported to me. Tigard also has a good program, and when I left there, they were in the process of automating and digitizing all those records so that they could be searchable through websites and things like that. So I strongly support it. I take a little bit of issue with saying that people don't want to do this because my experience is, yeah, people want to have this done because they want to have the information that resides someplace else accessible to them. They just don't want to give up their own records.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, it's a real push before you kind of thing.
And actually what we find is when this kicks off and you start to see the improvements, and whoever pilots this and really goes gung-ho and gets control, everyone else sees the benefit. And then it's not a question of do you want to do it, it's a question of how quickly you can do it.
Right.
Then it's a resource issue, and that's back to money and juggling all the balls that you all have to juggle.
One of the other benefits we found in City of Portland, again, back in the dark ages, was just by getting a handle on your records and your files, you free up a lot of real estate in the office. You don't need all those file cabinets. And so there's a physical efficiency that comes along with this too. So bottom line, you know, I do recognize the challenges. I do recognize some of the hesitation, and you know, be free to carry the message. You've got a supporter on the board.
I guess I just add, like Director Prosser, I've had the pleasure of moving forward systems to deal with records management and electronic retrieval and all the things you're talking about. One of the things I'd suggest is when you get done with this first phase, hopefully you can define for folks the vision of what this actually will be, because what I found out is that resonates with folks real quickly if they understand what this system, how it will benefit them in terms of just their daily work and access to records and things like, again, eliminating file cabinets is very important. So you've got a supporter here too on this. It's a great thing to embark, but it will not be easy. I know that it will have its hiccups, but I think the overall benefits of doing this for everybody will be immense. So look forward to getting your report when you get done with your first phase of the work, and what things we'll be able to do here to be more efficient and effective when we do our work. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
All right, moving on then. I'm going to go on to the consent agenda.
There was a quarterly financial.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, it's nothing against you, David.
Dave,
I've just been trying to move the meeting along.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to break Dave's heart. You know.
Well, I'll keep it short.
Thank you.
I did want to review the first quarter of FY14 financial results with you, and I'll be speaking, pointing out a few numbers and graphs in this packet that you've received. Starting with the statement of revenue and expenses that used to be called the income statement on page 7, I did want to highlight that total revenues were $2.8 million below budget for the first quarter. Payroll tax was the biggest component of that at $1.1 million under budget. We had budgeted an assumed underlying growth rate of 5.8%. So underlying growth rate is not, it's the growth in the payroll tax excluding the rate increase, impact of the rate increase. So our actual underlying growth rate was 5.3%. That's still, and just for some historical perspective, the 15-year average growth, underlying growth rate has been 4.8%. The under budget impact of the payroll tax was slightly offset by state and lieu. That actually grew 5.6% compared to our budget estimate of 4.7%. And the second largest piece of the revenue shortfall was due to passenger revenue, which was $1 million under budget, about 3.5%. This is roughly in line with the commensurate with ridership. Looking at the system operating expenses for the first quarter, they were $6.2 million under budget, really multiple factors, some just timing, some somewhat more fundamental. The combined operations division, wages and benefits, was the largest component. That was $1.8 million under budget for the first quarter. Really two major causes of that. We don't have our full budgeted complement of mini-run operators yet. We're roughly 21 mini-run operators under budget. And this was somewhat offset by increased overtime, but still had an overall favorable budget variance. And the other component, somewhat related, is that the budget assumed the top operator wage rate. And we've actually, as we've been hiring more operators, they start at 55% of the top operator wage rate and move up over a 35-month progression. So there were budget savings there. This hasn't been a real budget issue in the past when we weren't hiring, but now it may be something moving forward that we'll need to factor into the budget. But that has created some budget savings for this first quarter. Other operation division savings were in diesel fuel. It's about $400,000 under budget for the first quarter. Propulsion, electricity is $200,000 under budget, and maintenance materials is about $700,000. Within the G&A divisions, there are wage and benefit savings of about $500,000, primarily due to open positions in the general administrative staff. All these savings are real, but they're also somewhat limited in their time that they would generate savings. So not very few of those are ones you would really say are long-term ongoing savings. There's also additional just timing issues with some of our operations projects that will ultimately hit later in the fiscal year. I did also want to highlight on page 10, which is the consolidated statement of net position, what us old-timers call the balance sheet. There was a significant accounting change that I wanted to flag. This on page 10. TriMet has early implemented Governmental Accounting Standards Board pension accounting pronouncement number 68. This puts the full unfunded pension liability on our balance sheet for the first time. You can see that it's under the non-current liabilities, net pension liability of $253 million. Under previous GASB accounting rules, no pension liability is recorded as long as the governmental entity was funding what's called the annual required contribution, or ARC. So TriMet historically has not, under Governmental Accounting Standards Board rules, not reflected this liability, but we are now early implementing this and are showing that liability. It also, the other change related to GASB 68 is that TriMet also uses asset smoothing within our pension plans. So we take the gains and losses over and recognize those over a rolling 5-year period. So now we put both those deferred gains and losses on our balance sheet, either as an asset or liability. So those are reported now as well, which you haven't seen before. Obviously, they're disclosed in the footnotes of our financial statements. All this information has always been disclosed in the footnotes, but now it's brought forward to the face of the balance sheet. I guess the key numbers I would flag related to that, if we were to show, if we don't have the historical data because we haven't restated our previously audited financial statements yet. So at some later point, we'll be able to show comparative data, but we'll work with Moss Adams to do that when we restate FY13. But if I pull the numbers in, what you would see in September of 2012, we'd have an unfunded liability of $303 million compared to the $253 million that we're showing now. And instead of combined deferred, we have a deferred gain right now of $15,000. A year ago, that was a deferred loss of $10,000. The main improvements here in pension funding are due to two factors. One, in FY13, historically, TriMet has funded our pensions in arrears up to 14 months in arrears. In FY13, we brought that current, and now we're funding pensions current on a monthly basis. And you'll see there's no longer a current liability for pensions because of this change. That put more assets in FY13 into the pension fund as we caught up. Also in FY13, we had very good rate of return on pension assets. We experienced a 14% rate of return, which is nearly double the rate of return assumption the actuaries use. So those two items really brought the net liability down by roughly $60 million in FY13. That's reflected in the pension funded ratio has moved from 52% to 59% for the represented plan, and for the non-represented plan it's gone from 67% to 72%. Those were the key items I wanted to flag for you this quarter. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
First point, please.
Quick ones.
A quick one. So, Dave, you mentioned that some of the savings that we've received or experienced in this first quarter have to do with timing, and some of those things. And just quickly, is there any type of estimation on? I mean, sometimes we'll have different expenses that we expected to fall in the first quarter, fall in the second quarter. But then there's some things that we have just true savings on just because of circumstances. Is there any estimation as to what that number is in comparison to, let's say, the total operating cost? Looks like we're below a total expected budgeted total operating cost of about just under $8 million. I mean, is there any estimation as to how much of that is those items that we'll continue to see out the rest of the year? We just didn't get them in this quarter.
Roughly $2 million is expenses that were not incurred that we had anticipated incurring in the first quarter that we'll see later in the year. Other of these savings, like the wage progression savings, are real savings that we won't have to pay in a later period, but they're not ongoing savings either.
I certainly understand that.
Yeah.
Another quick question just on the statement of debt position, the balance sheet. So we've added the net pension liability to the balance sheet and the liabilities. Do we actually reflect anything on the asset side? Do we historically show the actual value of it? Because we have the liability that's unfunded, but then we have a portion that's funded. Do we show that on our balance sheet, our net position, statement of net position?
No, GASB has just wants the net number. So if the plan becomes over 100% funded, then you would carry an asset on your books. But as long as you are unfunded, you only reflect the net number. The assets technically are, sit in a trust and are not assets of TriMet. So that's why I think they go with this net concept.
Now, one last question in regards to, thanks for that answer, in regards to this piece of it. Now, when we say the net pension liability, that number is reflective as of a certain time period, correct?
Correct.
So at any given time, if the quote unquote the stock market, I mean, I was on the pension board for a little bit, or group. I can't remember how much is invested in stocks, but a big portion of it. So let's say the stock market actually goes down and declines. Our level of funded could decrease depending on what the performance is in the market, correct? So
absolutely.
That could actually, I mean, we could be 52% funded today, and if the stock market doesn't perform well, we could actually be 45% funded, at a later date, or that could go up if the stock market does well.
That's correct. We're 59% funded at July 1st or June 30th. How often we update this number is something we'll have to deal with. The actuaries only give us the liability adjustment once a year. So the assets, like you say, are moving daily. So I'm not quite sure how frequently we'll be able to update this. Obviously, for sure once a year at year end. And TriMet is also making contributions now, as I mentioned, on a monthly basis, so that decreases the liabilities we make those contributions. So that is something I'll have to get back to you on as to how frequently we can really update this down to the penny.
Excellent, thank you.
Other questions? Sorry, I missed you. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. All right, now let's go back to the consent agenda. And for the benefit of the audience, items appearing on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda and for discussion and action, which would be put into our normal action items later on in the resolution. So with that, is there any items on the consent agenda the board would like removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none then, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll call the question then. All in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Then we'll move right on to the resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution 13-10-60, which is authorizing the transfer of appropriated funds within the FY 13-14 general fund budget for the purpose of reinvesting in frequent bus service operations. Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Board President, members of the board, you might recall that you tabled this resolution at your last meeting to enable a conversation about this at your retreat last week. And so I'll be relatively brief since I think we have discussed this a number of times now. But I think it's fair to say that the retreat, the board reaffirmed the priority of adding back these important frequent and efficient frequent service. And just to restate that this proposal, which is actually for $2 million of subsidy, because of the efficiency of the service, actually grows $3.1 million of service because of the fair box return expected from this, again, efficient service. And again, just to note that the source of the $2 million of subsidy is actually unanticipated revenue from our ad contract that we're seeing, as well as unanticipated savings from our non-union health care premiums. So those are ongoing savings that were projected forward in the forecast that we shared with you, both at your last business meeting as well as and reviewed further at the retreat. Just to note that what this would mean is that between the peak hours, we would be able to run all of our frequent service lines at the 15-minute intervals. That's 12 lines that are responsible for 58% of our bus boardings, if you will, on the system overall. And just to be clear, 2 of the lines already offer that 15-minute service. That's the number 4 and the number 72. But what this will do is to make that service pattern consistent between all those lines. So between the beginning of the morning peak hour and the end of the evening peak hour, we'd be running at least 15-minute frequency on all of these bus lines. And this is, again, was service that was reduced during the Great Recession as we dealt with our budget shortfalls, and it has been a commitment to our riders to restore this as soon as it was reasonably possible. I'd also note that we've heard a lot from the community, both I give you a short update of this at your retreat, but also more since then. We've actually had both online outreach as well as on-board outreach. And related to the online outreach, we received about 1,700 comments from over 1,300 respondents, and 80% of the comments were quite positive related to this proposal. And on board, we touched base with about 1,900 of our riders, and about 1,400 of our riders receiving about 1,900 comments with 82% positive response. The top responses we got were frequent service is a good idea, want it, it's helpful. It will mean less waiting time, it will mean less travel time, it will mean less overcrowding. It won't mean world peace, but it will mean I think a great deal to all of our riders, and it clearly is reflected back in the comments we have, and I believe you have a summary of those comments as well in your information. And again, just to note on the timing issue, your decision would be required today if we are able to put this frequent service into place in March. So the budget resolution you're dealing with is really just the proportion of costs that would occur in this fiscal year, but we understand, and the importance of that is that that is an ongoing commitment that goes beyond that. So we wanted to make sure that you understood that the annual cost may be $2 million, but obviously in this fiscal year, because we're dealing with only one quarter, it is less than that, and so the budget resolution basically reflects a quarter of that ongoing cost. And I would note that if favorably approved, we will put this into place, and it will be subject to the sign-up of our operators in, I believe, December, and they will then actually sign for those shifts that occur beginning in March. I'd also note that we'll need to begin the ramp-up, as we already are, for other reasons of hiring additional operators. So if you know good, responsible people who have a great customer service ethic, we're hiring at TriMet. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I suspect we've got some questions. Director Esmond.
Is there any way to speed up the return of frequent service before the holiday, before Christmas?
The
If you had the
answer,
magic wand?
the answer would be no, and the issue is the number of bodies that we have available to put on service.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, quick question.
Please.
In regards to, so 10 lines will get frequent service.
Actually, 12 will have them at
Well,
as a
10 new
result,
lines.
10,
So
yeah.
12 will be the total, but 10 new ones.
Exactly.
I ride the 4, so I understand the benefit of frequent service. So, you know, I missed a bus just by like 30 seconds, and it was kind of nice knowing that the next one's coming on 15 minutes later. And it actually got there 12 minutes later, so it was even faster than what I was hoping for. In regards to, you know, as we're looking at passenger revenue, we just saw the report on passenger revenue. We're down about $1 million. As we look at some of our weekly riding items here, you know, we're down from some of our projections. I'm sure we probably took a look at this, but will this have an effect on encouraging ridership? I mean, you would assume it would, but did we take a look at, you know, what the demand curve would be, you know, if we added these new frequent service 10 service lines? That's quite a bit.
Absolutely, and when we use sort of the, if you will, the elasticities, as economists call them, related to demand, the service interval is really one of the most important and most effective in terms of attracting new riders to the system. And I would also say, sort of looking at our ridership over the last few years, I think we've had an effect of the reduction. Now, sometimes when you reduce these frequencies, as we did in 2008, 2009, it takes a while for people to sort of see that additional inconvenience add to their life. And so that tends to trickle away. And so, but adding it should actually have a pretty, I think, positive effect in terms of ridership overall. We have experts here who can delve into the elasticities if you wish, but I think that's a general answer.
All right.
I have one person who's signed up, like to testify. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
I missed your slide.
I thought of Another question. This only deals with weekday.
That's right.
Correct. How much more would it cost to restore all frequent service?
So I'm going to respond, weak memory cells, but I think it's about the total requirement for all frequent service restoration would be on the order of $8 million overall. Is that, Shelley, do you remember?
I don't off the top of my head, no.
So that's about the right range. And so there's, you know, so here are the other components that we would begin to think about. Would be the evening shoulders and the weekends. And Saturday can be different than Sunday, because again, Saturday generally higher loads, a little more active travel day than Sunday, so you can begin to think about. And you think about it in terms of the frequent service bus lines, but also think about it in terms of the MAX service. And one of the things I'm really hoping we can figure out before we open the Portland Milwaukee is getting the rest of the MAX system up to that 15-minute level. And actually, while there are, I think we reviewed with you some important operational advantages of having this regular service on the bus side, that's particularly true on the MAX side where we have these merging points and places where the trains need to sort of meet at regular intervals. So it's really quite advantageous to run the whole system on the same general headway, given that. So, so yes, evenings, each weekend day, and then MAX are the different components that we would probably be bringing to you as the budget allows.
So,
Excuse me, just a tiny clarification, please.
If you want to testify on this, why don't you come
I
up?
don't want to testify. I mean, I am testifying, but
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask, is the 57 frequent service on your list? That's all I want to ask.
The answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
so basically, you know, we're starting with the high priority, most effective, most used portion, but we still have a ways to go.
We do.
Now, why don't we have Jared Franz come up from Opal, who's indicated he'd like to speak to us on this resolution.
Good morning. Morning. President Warner, members of the board, my name is Jared Franz, the Law and Policy Associate at Opal, and I'm trans-dependent. I think you all know me pretty well. I just wanted to come here today to thank you for delaying the action on this resolution when it was originally proposed a month ago. I think that decision sent a clear message to riders about how seriously this board considers rider feedback and equity considerations in the decisions that they make. And I hope that the delay helped you to answer many of the really important questions that you asked last month. I know that for Opal and for Bus Riders Unite, the delay helped us to confirm something that we've sort of said all along, which is that there may be, and in fact there are, many very good reasons to approve the plan that's in front of you, but equity isn't really one of those reasons. Saying that the frequent service proposal in front of you would benefit low-income riders and communities of color relies, unfortunately, on a common problem that arises when you take a number of statistics from a bunch of different bus lines and then average them, and then treat them as if all those lines were the same to begin with. I like to call this the comfortable man problem of averages, because if a man has his head in the oven but his bum in the freezer, on average he's pretty comfortable. And that's kind of what has happened to our conversation about frequent service. In fact, the last time that TriMet produced an actual list ranking lines by communities of color served and low-income individuals served, only 4 of the top 10 lines on that list were frequent service lines, and one of those lines, the 72, isn't even on your list for approval today because it's already at 15 minutes. Frequent service lines like the 12 are somewhere in the middle of the pack on those rankings, and in fact the 12 has probably dropped since the Parkrose portion of that line was turned into its own line last summer. And then you have frequent service lines like the number 33, which are way at the bottom of that list. In fact, only a small handful of lines in the entire system serve fewer people of color and low-income individuals. So this is what I mean when I say that there are, and there may be, very many good reasons to approve the plan in front of you, but equity is not really one of them. On the other hand, the equity case for extending transfer times has been made absolutely clear. And we think that it is an essential complement to to the incremental service improvements that are being proposed today. I just wanted to thank the members who had expressed their support at the retreat last week for longer transfer times. And I know that there is still some ambivalence or confusion, or choose your adjective, about what the proper amount of time is and whether we should be encouraging round trips. And I look forward to clarifying this conversation with board members and making clear about the history of round trips in the system, the changes that TriMet made to its code in 1982 that have allowed low-income riders to round trip on a single ticket for over 30 years. And I look forward to seeing ordinance on the November agenda to extend transfer times. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. I have nobody else who wishes to testify on this. Am I missing anybody? Come on up. Introduce yourself.
This is the testimonial part, right?
No, this is, we're talking about this resolution on frequent
my
service.
mistake.
Okay. So is there anybody else who would like to testify on the resolution regarding frequent service? Now, come on up.
This is the time?
You bet.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself and come up.
Can I hold the microphone instead of sitting?
No, you just, well, go ahead. Go
Okay,
on.
thank you. I just feel kind of funny talking with a whole bunch of people in back of me. So, but there's pretty much people in back of me everywhere. So, my name is Mary Whitmore, and I'm a retired teacher from Forest Grove, and I am a transit-dependent person. So I thank you for this opportunity to address the board. I just think that you should have the testimony, or I like to say overimony because I'm a woman. I don't have testes. So, okay. You should have your guest testimony first because it's better manners. If a guest comes into your house, you don't eat first and make them eat later. I like the idea of the Consumer Advisory Committee, but I think they need to have a position up there so that it's more easy for them to have input, because we're the people that are using the service. This morning I left at 7 a.m., just missed 57 bus. The sign at the Hatfield Government said track 2 leaving Progression in 5 minutes. The train was labeled Ruby Junction. In 3 minutes, the train on track 1 left, designated airport, which we could have taken. Our train then left. At the 5th stop, our train stopped because the train ahead was broken down. But that's not why I've come here today. Modern, seasoned public transit dependent people know it takes about 2.5 hours to get from Forest Grove to Portland. What I came here today about is the ride home. In the afternoon, it seems like the buses are 25 minutes to 30 minutes apart. That's probably an illusion, but it isn't an illusion when the time and space required for bicycles, wheelchairs, scooters, shopping carts, bags of recycled cans, backpacks, service dogs, and twin strollers hits the rush hour. Safety has become a concern. Did I mention the senior and disabled getting into fisticuffs over who is more senior or disabled than the other? Do we have a hierarchy of disabled who have preference for seating? As we are wedged in between these various obstacles, the boarding passengers are getting on, trying to thread their way through, and off-boarding passengers are crawling to pull the cord and make it to the exit door in time. Did I mention that the guy next to me vomited and just wet himself? If there was an emergency, people would be trampled and killed. Please restore the frequent service on the 57 line.
Thank you.
Was that under 3 minutes?
That was under 3 minutes.
Wow.
Just made it.
And Jana Toran. I have a note for her.
All right.
Thank you
very much.
And also, Lewis Turner came with me, and he would like to give me his 3 minutes. Is that possible?
No. Have you got something in writing you want to give us from him?
No, he wanted to just let me use his 3 minutes for public testimony.
Well, we have a public testimony coming up in a moment, and you're welcome.
Oh, that's not, okay. It's kind of confusing as to when is when, but bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. So, anybody else wishing to testify on frequent service? All right. Well, then what I would like to see, if there's
I'll make a motion.
a motion to approve Resolution 131060. Did I have a second down there too? So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the part of the board before we take action?
Just a quick comment saying that, I think we looked at this last month at the board meeting. They had an opportunity to really vet it at the board retreat last week, and there was actually a number of the public there in attendance, and saw how thoroughly we vetted this, and I feel very comfortable that we've given it a clear and decisive opportunity, and I'm ready to move forward.
Anything else? All right. I guess I would just say, Jared, thank you for coming. We know that equity is something we still need to work on. This does not address fully that issue. It will help, but it certainly does not solve the issue. We know we've got some work to do on that, and I think we recognized that last week. So with that, I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion. So all those in favor of the motion approving Resolution 13-10-60, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Did I miss something over there?
No,
Okay.
we got it.
All right, the next item is Resolution 13-10-61, which is authorizing multiple contracts for custodial services for TriMet properties. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, you're familiar with our efforts on our capital projects to include disadvantaged business firms in all of our opportunities. One of the priorities that I've had is to begin to spread those opportunities to some of our ongoing, if we call it, general fund contracted opportunities that we have. And we have the renewal of some of our custodial contract services that we thought provided a great opportunity, and do think provides a great opportunity to accomplish that. And so in order to accomplish that, recall that we have originally started and currently have in place 2 contracts for all of these custodial services. Instead, we broke the work down into smaller packages, 4 different lots that were geographically and like services defined, and then asked for proposals from various firms, emphasizing our desire to see disadvantaged business participation in all of these contracts. And so we had really essentially 4 contests, if you will, and the rules of the contest included that if you won one, you weren't eligible to participate in the other selections. Even with that rule, we had very competitive in a large number of firms. And I think there's a number of advantages to this. Certainly it furthers our commitment to disadvantaged business firms and begins to spread those opportunities to different types of businesses. But it also begins to give other businesses the experiences of working with TriMet, so that hopefully in the future we'll have even more competitive firms that are if you will, up to speed in terms of the kinds of work and our expectations. So this contract would actually award those 4 contracts to firms. All of them are either with DBEs or have substantial DBE or participation within the overall contract. And again, it was a bit of a complicated procurement, as you saw, and we did include all the tables of the rating of the various proposals that occurred. We believe that this is a very good way to proceed. I might note that the contracts themselves are 5-year contracts, but actually we award them in 1-year increments. So with your approval of this, what we do is award a 1-year contract to each of the firms. Then upon satisfactory performance, we would have the opportunity to extend that year by year over a 5-year period before we completely rebid the package. So with that, there's a number of us here who would be happy to answer questions. And this is a new approach for us to try to encourage more small business, disadvantaged business participation in our ongoing work activities. So it's a bit of an experiment, but we do like the result and do recommend approval for your at this time. And pleased to answer any questions.
Yes, so in what you just said, General Manager, about if there's one of the businesses who isn't meeting the standard that's needed out of 4 packages or 4 businesses. So what would you do in that instance?
In that instance, we would not award the renewal, and we would then rebid that package.
Just that.
Just that rebid packages.
Any questions right now?
Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. General Manager. And thank you as well as John L. Bell and the others who worked along in bringing this together. I think this is a great move of TriMet to begin to break down larger packages so that more businesses will have an opportunity to participate in that. And so for one, I am very supportive of this and glad to see that this piece has happened. It's going to happen, because definitely I am supporting it and want to commend you in doing that and trust that as we move forward, we'll find more opportunities to create opportunities for DBEs and MBEs to participate.
Mr. Chairman, did you have a question?
I have more of a statement. Yeah, I also congratulate you for doing this, but I just want to add a word of caution. And maybe you can answer the question now, or we can do it offline. How long, and some other arenas where I play, we're finding some of these MWESBs not quite what you see on paper. And how long do they last?
So
and I can do this offline.
Well,
overall,
and I think it
Gail,
is
this
worthy.
really good.
It is indeed worthy of great deal of conversation. But that's to a large extent what John L. Bell in the Transit Equity Office focuses on. Now, of course, we have statewide certification of these firms that we rely on. But I would also say
I was going to ask you that. I just assumed that was
right. And there is ongoing monitoring to make sure that the businesses are not, frankly, fronts, and so that is a key concern. And I think actually we've had very good in our work of sort of not having those sorts of businesses participate in our program.
I have information where, not here, but other places where you're the secretary of my business and you happen to be African American, we're going to set you up in business. And the person has no experience, has no assets, but now she's a contractor. I don't want to see us get in trouble.
I completely agree. And I would note that our monitoring efforts are very thorough.
Wait for the testimony.
I'm going to ask the question.
And as we look at the different contracts and we look at the comment of limiting one contract and one lot per firm, as I look at some of the stratification of the bidders, let's take a look at lot 1. And this is, I'm going to surmise or assume, I see that, CBM Systems is at $374,997, which is significantly below the majority of them besides one. And then as I begin to look through, and of course, since CBM Systems was the winner of Lot 1, they got removed from the rest of the bidding. The major question comes in when you start to take a look at the difference in proposed price for CBM Systems in comparison to their counterparts, and I can't help but wonder, if they hadn't been removed, what type of pricing would have been in place or proposed for the other 3 lots. And since it was significantly below their competition in the first 3, in the first one, would that have played out very similarly if they hadn't been removed from the other 3?
So, of course, we don't know the answer to that because we didn't open the envelopes once the award was for Lot 1. But what I would note that even in Lot 1, there's one outlier, obviously, which is the very high price, but otherwise, I would say that they're reasonably tightly arranged, so people were seeing the work in the same way. And I would say that that's generally true on the other lots as well, which is there may be an outlier or 2, but in general, when you looked at the number of bidders, they were relatively tightly spaced, if you will. And And so I think that gives us a little bit of comfort that the prices are fair in the marketplace. I'd also note that there's a little bit of market and capacity building that this is important for too, which is to obviously, hopefully, over a period of time, create more firms that can bid on our work, which should have reducing effect on the price over a long period of time. So hopefully the capacity building helps build capacity that actually gives us more competition in the future. But I do recognize that, you know, by limiting the pool of bidders in 2 through 4, or even as that continues, there is that little bit of uncertainty.
Well, I mean, I will say, certainly support the notion of us being able to deliver, contracts across a broad range of service providers to ensure, very similar to what you're saying, we have that ability to increase the pool of folks that can compete for, the book of work that we put out in the marketplace. So I'm certainly supportive of that, and it's good to see how many MVEs and ESBs that are applying and proposing for our projects. So that's very, very encouraging.
All right, we did have 2 people that wanted to speak on this resolution. One had to leave, so Tyrone Henry, President of Green Team Cleaning Services, come on up.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Tyrone Henry, President of Green Team Cleaning. I'm very grateful to Mr. President, members of the board, General Manager, and also General Counsel. I'd like to, first of all, thank you for breaking it out. Originally, earlier in the year, when this contract went out to bid, we were originally approached by a California-based firm to come and join and go after the project. We, of course, being a minority firm, were excited that we were at least getting to play in the game. However, when TriMet drew it back in and decided to go out another time, we said, well, we can do this ourselves. Let's try to get in. And lo and behold, we were successful. Now, we like to think that we're successful not just because we're a minority, but because we do a thorough job. We have about 18 employees, and we're very grateful for every one of our employees. We have currently, just want to give you an idea of the capacity, we are currently working on the South Waterfront OHSU Collaborative Science Building. That's about 690,000 square feet. We're also at Intel. We've been at the State Hospital, the Salem Hospital, and also Providence and Kaiser, all during the same time. So we're thorough at what we do. And we'd like to have an opportunity to prove that we can also do a good job for TriMet. And again, we are very grateful for the opportunity that you have broken it up. So smaller firms like ourselves can take advantage of this opportunity, just to show you what we can do. One more thing, I just want to add that, my father had a lot of sayings, and one of the sayings that sticks to me is one quote that he always used to use for Dr. Martin Luther King, that, if you dig in a ditch